Welcome, everyone, to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest and best stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and joining me, as always, is my co host, Rudy Tamarchio. Rudy, happy Friday, my man. How has your week been?
Happy Taylor Swift Friday. It was great up until 3 points starting right now, and it's already getting, weird out here in this neighborhood. So I'm happy to be inside, have some Florida State and Duke to look forward to tonight and watch and, talk out some
College
college football.
football all week. It was so weird to me to see college football on a Tuesday this week. I was like, wait, what is going on?
Yeah.
But it's a beauty. I'm not going to complain. I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to take what I get. But Rudy, we had a sneaky Saturday for some of the best teams. But before we take a look at games across the country, the sixth ranked Miami Hurricanes are heading to Louisville to face the Cardinals and get revenge for last year's loss. Rudy, how do the Canes remain unbeaten this week?
I mean, they're the better team. So really, it's just a matter of taking advantage of the bye week as best as they could by getting healthy. I think a lot of those issues on defense are just not having everybody together. I mean, look, this roster hasn't been 100% healthy since week 1 against UF, and really the first defensive series of week 1 against UF with Ruben Bain going down
Very true.
right then and there. So that should look good for Miami. They have everybody coming back healthy, both offensively and defensively. So I mean, just doing that, executing your game plan, and knowing what Louisville's tendencies are, Miami should be just fine.
Yeah, I think for me, it's we need to limit the explosive plays. Miami has allowed 7 plays of 50 or more yards, which I think ranks in the upper hundreds, which is
Not
wild,
good.
not good.
No.
Another aspect you mentioned it and touched upon it is how healthy are we? I'm not just talking about like Jalen Rivers returning, but I'm talking about like how ready are we? How ready are these guys to go? Because we're getting late into the season. We're in the third week of October. A lot of teams, including ours, are probably beat up. But what is the extent of those injuries? Is it something that's going to be lingering for the rest of the season? Is it just simple bumps and bruises that we can kind of get over in that bye week? It's going to be a really interesting thing to see. I think how the defense responds is another key to victory, another key to the game. It's like the defense will be competing with a weakened O line. University of Louisville's missing their left tackle, who's out with a knee injury. So it'll be interesting to see those ends matching up against a backup left tackle, and to see if the chemistry on that line continues to either go down or if they can kind of get into a stride and rhythm. I also want to see how Miami's offense comes out. The number one offense in the country. Is it fast and furious, or are we kind of stutter stepping because it's been a bye week? What do you think? How do you think Cam Ward and the offense are going to come out?
Let's quote this song because we haven't been able to do it for like 20 something years, but don't try to front see. Number one offense in the
It's in the
country. We
country.
can finally say it for real for a
Ah,
long time.
ball
But
them boys.
yeah, what do they do? I mean, look, the good thing about this offense, especially against Louisville, is in their losses. Let's look at it this way. Louisville has shot themselves in the foot in all of their losses, and even in that close victory against UVA, they also,
Yeah,
did the Cavaliers a lot of favors. But what I found interesting about that game was Louisville struggled against two different styles of offense. Against Notre Dame, that's a big physical team. Miami
it's
can
true.
run that style of football. They've done it effectively against Cal before the defense kind of let them down and had to throw from behind. And if they want to go up tempo and throw all over the place like SMU does, Miami's capable of doing that as well. So as long as this is really a game of complementary football, if the defense can really shut down Louisville early, this is Miami's to run away with. But if there are continued struggles on the defensive side of the ball, this is where things start getting a little hectic for Miami. Either Cam Ward is going to take what the defense gives him, like he did the first couple of games of the year, or is he going to continue to try to force it down the field and not go to his checkdowns when he has them?
Yeah, I was doing a little research for this game, and Miami is 1-3 in Louisville since 2006, which is a little bit of a worry. Miami hasn't played a ranked team all season and may not probably play one. But this Louisville team is probably the closest thing, maybe a Syracuse, to a ranked team that they're going to get. So it'll be really interesting to see how Miami plays. I think Tyler Shough is probably the best quarterback we've played so far. I mean, Drones was good too, but and he was more of like I think a maverick in terms of a quarterback. But yeah, we'll
Yeah,
see what happens. I think Louisville really needs to limit its self-inflicted plays, like, whether it's turnovers or penalties. I think that's really what kind of kept them out of the game in Notre Dame, and I think it's what cost them the loss and the near loss to Virginia last week. Just sloppy play, undisciplined play. And I think Miami also needs to watch out for this freshman running back. Louisville recently, upgraded freshman running back Isaac Brown to their starter. He's averaging 8.6 yards and has a long of 77-yard run, which is very similar to that Florida run we had. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup to see because we've been burned by some running backs over this year. So
Yeah, he's a local kid too. He's from
yeah.
Homestead High School, so they know him pretty well here. They also
Oh
have
yeah.
Don
Don
Chaney Jr.,
Chaney. Yep.
who's also there. Look, this is a lot of the bye week couldn't come at a better time
I
because some
agree.
of the running plays you'll probably see Louisville try to do. Yeah, they ran the ball between the tackles pretty well against UVA at times, but I couldn't imagine them, trying to run a lot of the same stuff that Miami has struggled with over the years or over this season so far in terms of going sideline to sideline and playing assignment football. So having that extra week to deal with it, to get healthy. You don't need to run that at play speed to understand whose assignment is what. And with everybody, back, that communication looked really good those first couple of weeks.
It
I would
did.
hope that it comes back again.
Yeah, that's my hope. You and I both know Mario Cristobal's 0-2 coming out of the bye week, so I'm hoping that he can turn this around. I think this team is different. I think it's a different caliber of player. I think another silver lining to keep an eye on, which is something that I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, maybe one or two, but Louisville's only 58% in the red zone, which ranks 89th in the country. But here's the really important stat about that: they're 50% success in the red zone when it's power four teams. So like eliminate the cupcake teams. They're only, it's a coin toss once in the red zone. Whereas Miami, like we were talking about in the midseason report, they're hovering almost near 90%. Basically you get Miami in that 20-yard line, we're automatic. So anything else we're missing out for this game?
I mean, I just like the way that Miami's defense actually lines up against Louisville's offense. Because if you look outside of what we'll see running wise, Miami's really been their Achilles heel so far has been that secondary and the passing defense. And
Yep.
if you look at Louisville has to throw themselves out of situations sometimes. Like even in their wins, they've come back from trailing where they're just throwing straight verts. And you watch some of these,
Yeah.
their receivers had the advantage against those teams, but with Miami's pass rush, it shouldn't have that much time to throw the ball downfield like they were in previous games this season. Where Miami gets bit is when they run
Yeah.
quick plays where it's quickly like it's out of the quarterback's hands within a second. It's some short little route that's just not being covered properly. So I like the way that matches up. And hey, we can say whatever we want, but when Saturday at noon, we'll figure it out from there.
Yeah, and who do you have? And do you think you don't have to give me an exact score, but what are we talking about? Are we covering the spread, two scores, one score, field goal? What are you thinking?
I mean, the spread's what, like 4.5 or something like
Yeah, I
that.
think they actually upped it. I just checked ESPN. It's 5 now.
The one thing that I've learned is not being a betting man. If you
Yeah.
see a team that has like they're favored by 3 or something, they basically look at it as a push. Like if they favor
Right.
the home team by 3, it means that you're usually good for about 3 points at home in terms of your differential. So if they have the
Yeah.
away team up 4 plus now, I think people are starting to realize this Miami team can move the ball. And look, it's one thing to make mistakes, it's another thing to just not be able to line up. And as much as Louisville's made some mistakes in their losses this year, they just don't match up well with Miami. I think in terms of how they've, looked against other opponents, the strength of Louisville's defense is that defensive line. They haven't
Yeah.
really
Yeah,
produced
I'm
as
I'm
well this
actually
year as
very
they had.
worried. They have quite a few sacks.
Quite a few,
S
but like their sack leader, who was the ACC sack leader a year ago, only has like 2 this year. So in terms of like
right.
that piece, Miami's been very good in pass protection, with the exception of Cal bringing the house
Right.
when they had the chance. So if Louisville runs that same thing, I don't think they have the ability to really hang with Miami's receivers. So I
Yeah.
feel good on that. And I hope I don't get burned for saying
Well, I'm with you. You know what? So we can go down together. I think Miami's got this. I think we're covering the spread. I did say the other week 2 touchdowns. I'm going to be humble. I'm going to say by at least 1 touchdown this week. We'll have this. So we'll remain undefeated, 7-0, and the country can continue to hate us. But this,
I love it.
yeah, and,
Please
and you
keep
know
hating.
another thing we were actually talking about this, which I think is a kind of another thing to keep an eye on too, is the two programs have kind of been running a parallel kind of trajectory where preseason they were favorites. I think Louisville was number 3 or 4 to win the ACC, and so you're seeing them not play to their potential, but you're seeing one team in Miami continue to escape with victories, but you're seeing a Louisville team kind of going down. They, like I said, they pulled the victory out of Charlottesville, but I think that was a kind of a cupcake team. I don't think Virginia was as good as their record says they were, and so they were kind of lucky to escape with that. So it'll be interesting to see if Louisville can bounce back and Miami will eventually catch that loss that they've been avoiding, or whether Miami will continue to make those changes and move forward, and Louisville will continue to take that downward spiral.
Yep.
But what this year, Rudy, we have seen some seismic shifts across the college landscape as perennial powerhouses find themselves in uncharted waters with early losses, games that shouldn't probably be close, and underdogs for the first time in years. So I think for the first time, we're seeing major programs, not these FCS schools or these maybe bottom feeder schools and conferences, but we're seeing a lot of big teams like Bama, Georgia, different teams getting eaten alive out of either NIL opportunities or transfer portals. What are some of the things that you've been noticing this year, Rudy, when it comes to some of the major changes that have been going on in college football?
I mean, I think for the first time in a long time, we're seeing that there really is no like one or two de facto elite teams in college football anymore.
Yeah,
As
I would
much
agree.
as there's this, beauty of the two, now they call them the Power Two conferences between the Big Ten and the SEC.
Right.
Hey, that is not true anymore. If you look at way those conferences are going, they're the perennial powers that be in those, the Ohio States and Michigans of the world. Ohio State goes to Oregon and gets beaten. We kind of saw that one coming. So the Ducks look like the favorite out there, the former Pac-12. Don't
Yep.
don't knock those teams now. They're actually doing it against Big Ten competition. You
Yeah.
see Alabama go down to Vanderbilt, which is the perennial bottom feeder of the SEC. And the same story is true across the landscape of college football. The ACC is kind of like this, weird anomaly where there's four teams right now that are undefeated in conference play. By the time this is all looked at, or by the time the season schedules are all played for, there are likely going to be three undefeated teams
Yeah,
at one
that's
point in time
wild.
between SMU, Clemson, and Miami. Most people think that Pitt's going to be the one that drops out of the undefeateds because they play both
Yeah.
SMU and Clemson. So it's a weird way to look at things. Obviously, Texas looks really good. They've struggled with their backup quarterback, but now that Quinn Ewers is back, they
Hmm.
look good again, and they're kind of like the perennial favorite in college football in the SEC. But there's still a long schedule to be played. I don't think, like you said, depth is an issue now for everybody. You can't just go
Yeah.
3, 4 deep. And as much as
Yeah.
everyone said that Georgia's the cream of the crop with that, well, they already have a loss to Alabama, which looked great a couple weeks ago. That doesn't look so great now, especially how they've responded and played since that game.
Yeah, and I don't get me wrong. I love the changes because there's nothing more that I love about college football than the parity, right? It's like there's going to be parity no matter what, and I'd say in the last 2 decades we've had a lack of that. We've always had, like you were mentioning earlier, 1 to 2. Let's just be gracious and say maybe 4 schools that are powerhouse schools, but then throughout the year, it whittles down to the two most strongest teams that make the championship. But I think this year what we're seeing is we're seeing with conference realignment, we're seeing a lot of disruptors come into new conferences. You have Oregon going into the Big Ten and being ahead of the pack, even though Indiana is technically in a higher standing than Oregon. But we do know that Oregon is the powerhouse school in the Big Ten, which you would normally think Ohio State or Michigan, and Michigan is struggling to do what they're doing. You have SMU and the ACC in their first year. I mean, a lot of these first year programs are entering their new conferences, Texas and the SEC, and
BYU
they're
in the Big 12.
BYU in the Big 12. I mean, this is a really wild year. I mean, if you don't take a minute and stop and check out what's going on, you're really going to miss a lot of major changes. And it's almost like light speed, where it's funny that like the joke about college football is that it moved at a like a snail's pace, like a turtle and peanut butter, right? Like it's
Yeah.
just like, but we're seeing, especially like in the last 2 years and this year in particular, just this massive shift where you have a team like an Alabama, or let's just even use FSU. I think FSU is a great example where 13-0 last season should have been in the playoffs. And then this year they buy into the transfer portal and go broke.
Might
I
lose
mean,
to Duke tonight.
yeah,
Yeah.
could you imagine?
They've
Never.
never lost to Duke,
Never.
ever.
And they could there's a very strong chance they could lose. And this is what you get when you get these NIL, because people won't say like NIL is playing a factor, but I think it does, because it's
Of
kind of
course.
like, I feel like the free agency issue in the NFL where, these players will get the bag, and then what happens that next year? They're busts.
Yeah.
They're not putting up those numbers. And I'm wondering if these college players are kind of like doing that. And it's like, to me, it's like, Bama, to me, in my opinion, they're a great team. They're a really good team. Are they elite? I don't know. Like, are we going to see them in the SEC championship? Are we going to see them in Atlanta year in and year out?
Right. And that's the thing is there actually like an elite level team anymore? It's one of
Yeah.
those where if you're looking
I
at,
mean, I think we'll find out with Texas
yeah,
tomorrow. I think if Texas blows, I think if Texas does what Alabama did to Georgia in the first half, but continues to keep their foot on their throat, I think we can all uniformly just say, yeah, Texas is the number one, like, unquestionable team in college football right now because they played lights out. They have the number one defense and they're a top five offense.
yeah,
They're crushing it. And to me, there's actually what's wild to me when we were talking about parity is statistically, I was looking this up. Statistically, the worst teams are actually better than in years past. So I think there was like a negative 23 rating for the lowest teams. This year they're negative 17. So we're
mhm,
seeing this incremental gain because players are getting more spread out, which is giving schools more opportunities to be more competitive. And like I had a firm belief that when Nick Saban retired, whenever that was going to be, we were going to see this, that you would see a little bit, the parity would become more observable, and you'd be able to, there'd be a little bit more of an even playing ground. Now, NIL has kind of mixed that up because now you have to have collectives that are going to be recruiting and keeping these kids home, where it was before, it was the prestige of the coach or maybe facilities. Now it's, I think, just
yeah.
it's the NIL. And it's like wild too. What I think about this year, one thing I was thinking about is the transitive property, right? It's like in years past, it's how we would rank people. It's like, well, how did you play in week one versus this team who they're now playing in week 8? That's not working at all because there are some week one wins that don't look good at all, like ours, Florida.
They did their part. They tried to make it look better with that performance against Tennessee, and honestly, they should have escaped kneeling with that win. But
They should have
they
poor poaching,
Gators
poor
gonna
coaching.
Gator, Gator gonna Gator, and they grabbed defeat from the jaws of victory there. And don't
But
get me wrong, it was a masterful last drive to tie that game to force overtime, and then just completely lay an egg in overtime. And granted,
yeah,
I will give Gator fans some credence here into saying Tennessee did line up offside like 3 consecutive plays in overtime. But hey, that extra inch on the ball isn't the difference between you not getting the ball away and doing what you need to do on offense.
Yeah, and speaking of the SEC, those changes are causing some strong SEC programs to stumble. I mean, you had Bama squeaking out a win against South Carolina.
Yep.
I mean, if South Carolina had a quarterback who could actually throw or was halfway decent, they would have absolutely won that game, in my opinion. I
Yeah.
feel like they just, and it's not the kid's fault. I think he's a freshman. It's just what was he going to do? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like he's playing in Tuscaloosa, and the reason why I wanted to bring that former story up with this too is because when Nick Saban was the coach, you would see Alabama maybe lose a game, but then the next week they were coming out like on fire, ready to run through a brick wall, and they were blowing that team out. So like this South Carolina game should have been like a 42-10 game if Nick was the coach and if Bama had the depth that they had, but they didn't. And then you have Georgia letting a 1-5 Mississippi State team put up 31 points on them, which by halftime they had the game over. And even in midway through the third quarter, it was still a very convincing victory and lead. But somehow Old Miss, like again, who's 1-5 and should have no
Or
business
Mississippi State. Yeah.
coming back. Yeah, Mississippi State coming
Yeah.
back. It's like, to me, that was wild. And then, of course, like you were just alluding to and telling us, Tennessee just continuing to struggle offensively. And then Billy doing Billy things at Florida. It's just it's wild to me to see the SEC in the turmoil that it's in because it's been known to be such a consistent conference, and there's just so much inconsistency this year.
Yeah. Finally. I mean, you're right. I think
Yeah, I'm
it's
not, I'm
true
not, I'm
though.
not complaining. Don't get me wrong, but it's like you're like, this is a bit of a train wreck, you guys. You guys
Yeah,
need to
but
get
like
your house in order.
just like you said though, when it came to like Saban and all that, like yeah, I think the loss that they suffered to Vandy, everyone wanted to use the Nick Saban adage of rat poison and saying they're starting to
Yeah,
believe they're untouchable. They've already passed their biggest hurdle. Then they lose in this letdown, but then the way they struggle in South Carolina is like, oh, now these are actual systemic issues with the team, with the personnel. Are they not lined up properly? Are they making, is it more mistakes, or is it just that the talent pool has gotten a little bit more even when it comes to the SEC? You're seeing that across the country, and look, we're seeing it at Miami too. In terms of we've known for a long time because we've been mid for so long of like where the talent looks. I mean, just as a Miami fan looking at this team compared to
absolutely.
previous years, the talent, difference from year to the 1 year to the next is incredible.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with a Lexus, but when you go from a Lexus to like a Mercedes-Benz AMG, you
Yeah,
you kind of like, okay, like this is a lot
right.
nicer.
Right. So, like, when you're watching this, like, just a couple of players at a different program can change things in terms of where they can execute and how they match up against other teams. And same thing, if a one or two teams are gaining talent like that, that means another program's losing it. When you're not
That's
three
true.
deep anymore and you only have like your backup may not be quite as good as your starter, that's the crapshoot. That's college football. That makes it so, fun. And like you said, it's been a long time since it's looked like this.
Yeah, and did you catch that the Mississippi LSU game, the Ole Miss?
Sure did.
That was, woo, that was what. Do you? I mean, again, anything can happen. We're only halfway through the year. There's still a lot of football. But do you think? Do you think Ole Miss is eliminated from the playoffs, or do you still think they have a shot? Do you think they have an inroad still to get to the playoffs?
So it's going to be really interesting because we're a couple weeks away still from like the college football playoff committee coming out with their first rankings. I think it's November 5th is the day that
Hmm.
they have the first one. Um, eh, Knowing what that poll looks like will give us a better understanding of what the rest of the season looks like in terms of playoff picture with like a two-loss SEC team being disqualified from there.
Yeah,
Because uh, I think on paper they don't look as good top to bottom. I would argue that there isn't
Ole
even really
Miss.
like a top heaviness to the conference anymore. It's
Right.
almost more like a higher elevated version of the ACC circle of suck, where everybody beats everybody. That's what we used
Yeah.
to call it, particularly the coastal division, was just the circle of suck. Everybody beat everybody, and no one left there without two losses. But you somehow made it to the championship game.
Yeah.
So it could be like that.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think it's inevitable with the SEC when you with the additions of Oklahoma and Texas. Because here's the other thing: like, as much as I can't stand Oklahoma because I think they're constantly overrated, Oklahoma's not known to stay down for long, so they're going to rebound. I think in the next couple of years, and you'll have another powerhouse program in the SEC. So I think for the years, I think the years of undefeated SEC teams or only one loss SEC teams winning a championship are over. I think we're that like the years where LSU had two losses. I think that was the 2009 team or 2017 team. Also, the 2 years, the last two championships they won, they had two losses. I think we're going to see more of that. But speaking of LSU, are they legit? What do you think of LSU?
No, no. I mean, look, they've squeaked out a couple of wins. That one was at home. It looked really good for them. I look. I think they are who they are. They definitely look better than when they played USC to start the year. But
Yeah,
I think it's another one of those. It's another SEC team that's going to be one or two losses that they have flashes of brilliance, and they also just don't look so good against some competition. They're really going to cannibalize themselves, and it's going to look the same in the Big Ten. It's going to look the same probably in the ACC is like the only conference right now where it's going to look like there's two undefeateds that are going to be playing each other in conference.
yeah. The ACC. I mean, the reason why we don't really spend too much time talking about them, one, because I think you and I both believe UM is
We
going to
can't
win
stand the
the.
ACC. That's why. Yeah.
That too, yeah, yeah, no, no. But I just think it's just so obvious. But the funny thing about the ACC is it's got this optic where because like we're going to be looking at this week's games and the games we're looking at this week it wasn't intentional. It just so happened that the four games we're looking at in our predictions happen to be SEC and Big Ten teams. But I think it also is kind of a marker of that just ACC games just aren't as sexy right now because of that perception that there's that circle the circle of
Yeah.
suck. You know what I mean? It's like
They're also
it's hard to
poorly
get that stench
officiated.
off of you, and especially when you have two, and now I mean with SMU as a dark horse, two teams with a possible third that are just really catching steam and just don't look like they're slowing down. I mean, yes, Miami has been a little inconsistent in its play, but who's stopping that offense, right? No one
Yeah.
has been able to stop the offense. And then Clemson has been playing pretty decent. I mean, they haven't really played that many teams, but they're consistent with putting up 40 plus points. It's just kind of like you already know, but like I think over in the Big Ten, they're seeing some new faces leading the pack. While Oregon got a massive win against Ohio State, programs like Indiana and Illinois are hoping to prove that they have what it takes to win. What did you think of that Oregon Ohio State game, Rudy?
I kind of went the way I expected it. I didn't
You
expect,
did call it. Yeah, you did
I
call
didn't
it.
expect Oregon to, pull out some, rule that now the loophole's been closed on what happened. Notice that like intentional, too many men on the field, illegal
Oh yeah.
substitution. to take some time off the clock. Yeah, they finally they've closed that loop, so that can't ever happen again. I didn't think it
Oh,
would take.
I'm sure there were quite a few programs calling in and saying, "Yeah, we need this to be taken care of right
Oh, I
now.
can
Like
imagine
this needs to be handled right now because they didn't want it
that.
on their hands."
That and also just the absurdity of Will Howard taking, sliding with no time left. By the way, that was the other quarterback that Miami was looking at, to
It
where
was. And
considering
Will
for like
Howard's I won't lie, Will Howard's looked great
he's good.
this year, but I still hand over foot would take Cam Ward any day, even with the pick six. Even if you gave me a pick six in each of the games and but still kept the results of us winning, I still would take Cam Ward over Will Howard
That
any
last
day.
drive is everything you need to know. And that's where like I think
Absolutely.
I was even texting you guys, like after that slide and time expired, to go, that's why Miami got Cam Ward.
Oh
Will
yeah.
Howard's a great player, but that's not happening with Cam.
And the weirdest thing is Nico Imaliava from Tennessee had a very similar situation where time was running out, and you're just like, what are you doing? You have to have the wherewithal to realize you either need to throw it out of bounds and stop the clock, or you need to turn on the Jets and find that hole. Which, I mean, obviously that wasn't going to happen with both teams in the positions they were on the field. But to me, though, I was just watching that. And I'm like, was it the pressure? Was it that time in the game where they just couldn't handle that pressure and they just caved? But it was very weird to me to watch the ending to the Arkansas Tennessee game 2 weeks ago, and then to watch OSU do almost the exact same thing with just seconds left.
Yeah, and something that I think that game finally can put the nail in the coffin on the old adage that the Big Ten is the only conference that plays like smash mouth football, and that these teams out west can't really compete with
Right?
that. Look, Oregon went into the horseshoe with Mario Cristobal and
Yep.
won that game and played
Handedly.
the exact same physical
Very
style of
convincingly.
football. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I think they even had like a stop on fourth down to win that game.
Hmm.
So I think Oregon can finally say, like, look, we can play with the rest of these guys. And yeah, I mean, if that game's in the shoe, maybe it goes a different way because home field advantage does have something for momentum and crowd noise. And I think people learn too. Autzen gets loud.
It
Autzen
does.
gets really loud, even though it only holds like 60,000 people. It doesn't matter. That
And
place
it's
is historically one of the loudest to play in college football.
yeah, and it's not like they're like an SEC school who has chants. They're just screaming for no
Yeah.
reason. They're just like, loud noises. That's all they're
Phil Knight
doing.
said to scream. So you will scream for Phil Knight
Oh,
because everyone gets
absolutely.
Nikes if you make crowd noise.
Listen, and I don't blame these players going there. I mean, if they ever give me Nikes, I'm down. I'm like, you can call, quack 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 quack.
Quack,
I'm a
quack,
duck.
quack, Mr. Ducksworth.
But
Yeah.
the other team in the Big Ten that's a favorite, Penn State. Wow, getting some help from the refs a little bit. You and I were
Oh,
talking about that with the USC game.
yeah. I had USC in that one, and it played out the way that I thought until
Yep.
overtime. I went, oh my God. Uh, Look, I'm not going to blame the refs for USC losing that game because the fact that they made it to overtime, USC came out with their hair on fire in the first half. The fact that they let Penn State back in that game on their own home field is what ultimately cost them in the end. And look, it might be a depth issue. The points that you raised last week makes perfect sense with defensive players, starters, key players out because they're sitting out in the portal. They're going to go somewhere else next year.
Yep.
That definitely punished them. And look, I don't think Penn State, I'm still not sold on Penn State.
I'm not
Their
either.
defense has trailed off a little bit with Manny Diaz departing because he's look, as much
I
as people want
agree.
to like knock him for being a head coach, he's a hell of a coordinator. He's been a hell of a coordinator
Phenomenal. I mean, if
everywhere
you
he
look at Penn
was.
State's defense pre Manny Diaz, he
Yeah.
did he did miracles in that building.
Yeah.
Like the things he was able to just renovate and in just a year's time has
Yeah.
been wild.
Schematically.
Yeah.
Schematically. I mean, look, he brings that attacking style of defense everywhere he goes. And when you have it's a difference between being a head coach and a coordinator. When you have somebody else's guys, they're capable of doing things, great. But to sustain that year over year is another thing. And we'll see if he can do that at Duke eventually. But yeah, Penn State's had a defensive drop off because their philosophy is a little different this year. And they are frankly lucky to escape with that win.
Do you still think it's a 3-team race in the Big Ten? Because now we have these two other teams that are kind of waiting in the rafters. You have an Indiana team that's 6-0 for the first time, and then you have an Illinois team that's kind of just sneaking in there as well. They're undefeated in conference play too. Do you think it's just all Oregon, or do you think that maybe we could see a Cinderella team make it into the playoffs in the Big Ten?
I have to look at their schedules and know who does Illinois and who does Indiana play out the rest of the year. Because to be honest, I'm thinking it's a rematch between like Oregon and Ohio State in the championship game at this point. They
Do you
look
really?
like the best
I
team.
was that was actually one
Yeah,
of my questions. I was going to ask you. So you really think it's just going to be those two teams? Because here's the thing with the Big Ten. Let's I'm bringing up
yeah,
their roster. Here's the thing. Indiana plays Ohio State the second to last game, and they play. I mean, that's brutal. They're going to play Michigan and Ohio State, so
yeah,
they'll probably lose one of those teams, two games, if not both. You
yeah.
know, and then you're going to have who does Illinois play? Illinois plays Michigan this week, which we'll be talking about, but they don't play Ohio State. They do play Oregon though.
Yeah.
So I think,
To
yeah, I
me,
think, I think you're right. I mean, as much as I want, because I love the underdog and I love seeing teams that like, and we're going to talk about them later in our preview, but I love seeing teams that just are not known for winning they're topping the standings in their respective conferences.
yeah, it's exciting. It's one of those where like it's not even like a story of like a dormant program that had history from a long time ago. Like these are two basketball schools that are doing pretty well in football this year, and that's why I'm not sold on it because they're having a good run, and you could give them their flowers. You had a great run, but at a certain point, I don't think they could sustain that for an entire season. And being those two teams that just played each other, that game was thrilling. And look, they look like the top of their conference. So it's a different situation than other parts of the country where, at least in the Big Ten, you can afford to have one loss in conference and you're likely going to have a chance to go back and play for the title.
So who do you think wins in part two, Oregon or Ohio State? Do you think Ohio State?
Uh, that's a neutral site game, I'm assuming, right? Do you know
Yeah,
where
in
that
Indy,
championship game is? Is it
in
like in
Indy.
Detroit or something?
No, it's
Indiana?
in Indiana. Yeah, it's in
So
Indiana.
it's at Lucas Oil.
Yep, in Lucas
The
Oil, where the Colts
dome.
play.
It's a dome. I'm going Oregon again.
I think so too. I really do. I think in a neutral site and indoors, I think they've got it because I don't think it was the crowd that really played a favor
No.
in Oregon's win. I just think Ohio State because like Ohio State played great. Like I can't say that they played like a bad game. There were again. There's that one play at the end, and that last drive was a little questionable.
Mhm.
But other than that, they played great. But I just think Oregon, they have the players. And not only that, but like I feel like the chemistry of that team is really, really tight. Like they're clicking. They were rough first 2, 3 games, but that Oregon State game that when they played them and blew their rival out, like to me, that was when I feel like they clicked and they were like, all right, let's go. We're
Yep.
rolling. Well, I know last week we highlighted some big troubles for the Big 12, but could the conference that many thought would struggle to get one team in get two? We have BYU handling Arizona last week, Iowa State remaining unbeaten, and Texas Tech just quietly chipping away at wins, and all three are favorites in their Week 8 matchups. Rudy, could we see the Big 12 getting two teams into the playoffs?
No. Sorry. I'm going to dump on that parade right now because it's yeah, they've looked good in conference, but if you look like out of conference performance wise, the darling there is BYU. I mean,
It
especially
is,
with
yeah.
their victory over SMU. If SMU somehow, runs the table and, goes to actually either qualifies for the ACC or is one of those three teams in that rotating wheel. The rules for that, by the way, absolutely stupid to see who gets in for the ACC championship game.
Oh,
They
yeah,
made
don't even
SMU
get
look
me
really
started on it.
bad. They had like what 15 points or 14 points against BYU. So Storm and Mormon looks good. They're playing, physical football and they've got the attention there. I don't think another team gets in only because historically, even when you had programs like Oklahoma and Texas with one loss, they were getting left out. So the fact that nobody is there that's left and,
Yeah.
was it like Boise State is in that conference right
Well,
now too, I think?
no, Boise State is in the group
They're
of
still
5. They're in the
Mountain West.
they're still Mountain West, but the 3 unbeatens in the Big 12 are, like I said, BYU, Iowa, and Texas Tech. The interesting thing about that, the reason why I brought up the two teams is because BYU has a very, very, very manageable schedule in front of them. They're the only challenge I believe they have in front of them is a Utah team who is absolutely struggling this year. Cam
Yep.
Rising is in his 12th year of playing, and we don't even know when he is going to show up if he ever shows up. And then on top of that, BYU and Iowa State do not play each other. So both of them could technically win out. Now, Iowa State does play Texas Tech. So of those two, the winner of that could still, again, remain unbeaten. But BYU and Iowa State do not play each other. And and I know last week we were highlighting the fact that the Big 12 doesn't have any top 10 teams. Well, here's the thing. You get a few weeks down the road, you have these SEC teams play each other that are in the top 10. And the same thing with the Big 10, and they start eliminating each other. These teams that are just on the outside, Iowa State at number 9, BYU at number 13, could easily sneak into the top 10. And the thing we have to remember with the college football playoff is the conference champion automatically gets a berth. But
Yep.
then it doesn't start like, okay, well, once you're it's like not like, okay, then it's going to be the number 14. It could be anyone from 1 to 12
Yep.
that could get in. So if Iowa State finishes at number 9, they actually could get in, even if they lose at the Big 12 um
Championship. Yeah.
championship. So it's like, to me, that's why I was actually like, last week I was kind of poo-poo on the Big 12, but then I was kind of watching these games and I was like, this is getting a little interesting down there. I mean, again,
I'm still poo-pooing them for
you can
now.
poo-poo them all you want, but I'm just like, hey, this is interesting. This is amazing. I don't think the caliber, again, just because you get into the playoff doesn't mean you're going to get far in the playoff.
Of
But
course.
I think it's a great thing because, again, what is the overarching, because the overarching issue in my eyes for college football right now is this conference realignment. Look at these fireworks.
We'd love it.
Woo!
Let me
The
join you there.
Yeah,
Oh,
boom, give it to me, give it
it,
to me.
it didn't work. Oh, sorry. I
The
tried.
overarching issue I feel that college football, or the existential crisis that they're facing, is this conference realignment. And the ACC is not helping itself, like what we were just talking about with these non-sexy matchups. And the Big 12, I mean, what is everyone saying about them? They don't stack up against SEC or Big 12 or even an ACC school. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I think if you can give them these opportunities, you can show them, and then who knows, maybe they play really well in the playoffs and maybe get one win, or play a really good Oregon team or Ohio State who doesn't win the Big 10 and plays them really good to the fourth quarter. Maybe that gives them, some steam as a conference. I don't know, but again, this is where it gets interesting. This third week, fourth week of October going into November, where we start getting these rankings, but you also get a lot of these intra-conference games knocking each other out of the top 10.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're going to wait and see what happens over the next few weeks. But you know what? Let's take a look at this week's marquee matchups. What do we got on our Saturday slate? I want to kind of start things off with number 1 versus number 5, Texas versus Georgia. It's the first time these two will be meeting since the 2019 Sugar Bowl. Texas won, but both programs are in different stratospheres now. I would never say Georgia 2019, maybe they're closer than Texas is to what they are now, because Texas 2019 is definitely not the same as 2024 Texas, right? You would agree with that?
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I would say um, three of the top matchups of the season have been winners. So when you look at top 5 matchups, all the winners have been home teams. So it'll be interesting to see if Texas can beat Georgia. It's very weird to say that considering who Georgia is, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, in my opinion, I think Georgia has to win this game to stay in contention to get to Atlanta. What do you
It's
think?
absolutely a must win for them.
Yeah.
If you're in Austin, look, if you think Miami is going to be crazy this weekend because there's 3 points and there's Taylor Swift going on, Austin this weekend has the
Wild.
Georgia Bulldogs coming to town on Saturday, and they have Formula One that has a race on Saturday
Oh,
and Sunday.
that's
So
right.
hope you're not taking an Uber in Austin, Texas this weekend because it's going to be minimum like $250. Maybe Max Verstappen's your driver like today or tomorrow. But
Yeah.
yeah, this is a must win for Georgia. Absolutely. Because one, it's going to reestablish themselves in the national landscape to say, actually, we're capable of beating big teams again. I know it looked really sexy when we beat the crap out of Clemson week 1, and that we haven't had really a performance like that since.
Yeah, it's
And
true.
granted, it took them the second half to really beat Clemson down. That game was close at the half.
It was.
Uh,
It was a very Clemson did play up, but there was those halftime adjustments.
yeah. So to go into someone else's house, look, they almost orchestrated that incredible comeback in Tuscaloosa. If they can actually get out of Austin with a win, yeah, I think everyone will be singing praises of Georgia again and saying, okay, maybe they are a favorite to win the conference. Maybe there is a top 3, top 4. It just doesn't look like that because we're seeing everybody beat each other. But hey, if Texas comes out of that with a win, I think they have to win convincingly to be like the elite team. If they
Yep.
struggle, if they have to come from behind to beat Georgia, Yes, they have the moxie. Yes, they're going to be, the front runner in terms of probably number one in the country from here on out. But it shows that they're weak and that they can not weak, but they have weaknesses. They can be beaten.
Oh, absolutely. I think also, I think Georgia needs to win to keep that dominance over the SEC. What was everyone talking about last year and maybe even the year before? It's like the baton was being handed from
From
Saban
Nick,
to
yeah.
Kirby, and now you have Texas with a not so fast, right? Texas is the number one, has number one total defense and scoring defense. I didn't even know this statistic. The Longhorns have only allowed just 3 touchdowns all season. That's crazy. I mean, that's
Yeah,
a really, really good defense. I think the two-headed QB room that they have, Quinn Ewers was a little slow coming out for the Red River Shootout last week, but obviously had a pretty good game. I think he needs to come out of the gate with his hair on fire this game. I think he really
absolutely.
needs to prove to the critics that the abdominal injury is nothing, and he is the number one. He is QB1. Um, I think where the key to victory is if UGA can get a push on that Texas D line. It's again. I know I said it earlier in the show.
Trenches.
It's
Yep.
the trenches, and it really, really is because it sets the tone for everything, and especially in the SEC. That's what the SEC is known for, having those big, brooding, like powerful linemen. And so I think whoever can give their QB more time, whether it's Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers, and give their running back more space, will naturally win this game. Because again, like I was mentioning, both defenses are stout. They're both incredible defenses. But I also, again, we were talking about at the beginning of the show, the injury bug, key injuries will play a part. Who's missing on, I think Isaiah Bond is questionable with an ankle injury.
Mhm.
And then UGA has a starting lineman and a backup running back who are out. So it's like, you don't think, oh, well, next guy in line. Well, like we were talking about earlier in the show, there is no next guy in
Yeah.
line. Like that guy was it. And so you have to make do with what you have. And I think, again, going back to the trenches war, it's like when you're missing when you're missing a lineman, and when you're missing, a running back who can give you fresh legs, how are you going to perform? You
You're
know?
also you're also missing key pieces on offense in terms of the chemistry that's there because to this game
Yes.
in this season, Carson Beck still is struggling to find who is his next go-to receiver. He doesn't
Yeah.
have Brock Bowers anymore. He doesn't have Lad McConkey anymore. That's been a question mark all season. And at one point, it looked like Colby Young. I don't know. I haven't followed his situation closely enough to know if there's any disciplinary action, if he's missing the game, if anything's happened, if charges got dropped. I have no idea. But that's one key player that might be out for your team because disciplinary reasons. And I think to touch on what you were saying earlier with Nick Saban passing the baton to Kirby Smart and saying that Georgia is the next powerhouse that's recruiting people 3, 4 deep, they've got disciplinary problems now. They have
Yeah.
like 2008 Florida Gator
Well,
disciplinary problems now.
diet. They're diet Florida.
Right.
They're
The only
diet
thing they're
UF.
missing is like one dude firing an assault rifle into the dorms in the
Yeah.
side of the walls
Like
to
at
be
least
full
at
blown
least
floor.
at least the infractions that Georgia is committing are just driving infractions. They're not like physical abuse or like
The
assault,
Colby
which
Young allegations are kind of
yeah,
domestic
yeah, the Cole,
violence
but
related.
here's the
But
thing with Colby Young, and when he left too, this is why I was like, okay, Colby Young was our best receiver last year, probably I
yep.
could say handily, but like compared to this year's receivers, I don't think he still would have been number one. He was very inconsistent also, and I think he's been very inconsistent for Georgia this year.
Well,
He
yeah,
he
the
he
same
isn't that.
habits. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's yeah. Carson Beck's got his hands full. It's going to be interesting, and he himself as a quarterback who was supposed to be a Heisman favorite coming into the season definitely doesn't look like it, especially when you look at a person like Cam Ward, who
Yeah.
is a QB favorite. I mean, those two are not even, don't get me wrong, no offense, Georgia fans, love UGA, but your quarterback and our quarterback are not the same at
Well,
all. And so
no
you could never,
nobody's Cam Ward. I mean,
yeah, no
and
one.
did you see his like self rating for this week in a press conference? Said
It
I've
was
been playing
mid.
pretty mid.
It's been mid.
Look,
It's been mid.
if you're every game this year, you're over 300 yards passing with like multiple touchdowns and like a single pick, and that's mid, I'll take mid any day of the week.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I want in my life. That's what mid is. I want a midlife. Give me a
I
midlife.
want to live mid
all
AF
day.
if that's what mid is.
But moving on to the other Saturday game that is going to be bringing a lot of eyeballs. We got number 7 Bama playing number 11 Tennessee. Tennessee won the last meeting in Knoxville 52-49. The loser of this game is pretty much going to be eliminated from SEC, the championship, and possibly the college football playoffs, barring utter chaos in November. I mean, I think something crazy would have to happen, but I think if whoever loses this game is pretty much out. Who do you got in this game, Rudy?
If you told me this, last week, I would have said Bama.
Mm-hmm.
And this week, I don't know anymore because seeing
I
Bama
know.
struggle the way they've had since that loss, seeing Tennessee struggle the way they had since that loss, this
Brutal.
game's a toss a coin. I don't know
That's
what
how
I'm
I
going to
feel
see
too.
because yeah, because like you mentioned Nico Iamaliava, he looked lights out. Tennessee was putting up 70 points on like Kent State, and they look like an unstoppable offense. And then they just completely tailspin. And even in that game last week against Florida, Nico looked shook for a lot of that game. So
Yeah.
I don't know what to expect from there. I don't know what to expect from Bama because they have one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. They have a very dynamic quarterback in Jalen Milrow who can throw the ball all the way down the field and also has, crazy track speed on his own. If it's a trenches battle and it's just between, because again, like you mentioned with Georgia and Texas, if it's just a battle in the trenches, I'm gonna take Bama for right
Ooh.
now, only because and I don't know if that game's in Tuscaloosa or if it's in Neyland. I think it's in Neyland because
It
I
is
was
a Needham.
watching. Behind me, I had Marty Smith of ESPN with Smokies Navy. Look,
It
uh,
is. It is in Neyland Stadium.
yeah, last time they played up there, they were throwing the uprights in the Tennessee River.
Yeah, they
Um,
didn't have as far to go as Vanderbilt did, but
no,
yeah,
they didn't have three
same
miles.
result.
It's right there.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't think they do it again. I mean, unless the only thing I could think of is if we see a shovel pass from Tennessee somewhere in that opening drive. Okay, they've gone back into the playbook and they figured something out, and they know that this is going to be effective. And I'm sure Bama's not going to be ready for it. Uh, if so, I'll put it on this. I think Bama wins, but if I see like one good shovel pass opening possession for Tennessee, it's going to be Rocky Top playing all night because that's something that Josh Heupel made his name doing as a quarterback at
That's
Oklahoma.
true.
I can't think of anybody else with a friggin' shovel pass. They ran one like every 4 offensive plays when he was there. So,
Ye-
yeah.
Yeah, so for me, I don't I'm not, I really it's a really a toss up as well. It was funny that you mentioned the trenches because Tennessee's defense is number 2 total defense, and it's the only thing that's been keeping them in these games.
Yep.
So I think Tennessee's defense can still keep them in this game. I'm hoping that someone put out an APB on Tennessee's offense and finds the real Nico Maliava because he's just been missing for
Yeah.
3 weeks, and it's just been a precipitous decline for the last 3 weeks. I think one of the most interesting aspects of this game will actually be the Bama defense versus the Tennessee offense, as both have been very disappointing for their respective teams. So it's kind of like going to be the Timmy versus Jimmy kind of thing, where it's going to say like, who, which one of you Crips is going to win? You know what I mean? Because you're both terrible, you know. And like to
Yeah.
me, the inverse will also be a matter of contention, as like Tennessee's D, like I was just mentioning, has only allowed 20 a game, and Bama's offense is averaging in the mid 20s a game in terms of points. So it's like you
Yeah.
have one team that's only allowing 20, and then you have a team that is averaging 20, and you're just like, okay, well, like it's like they kind of are complementary, but it's like, is that complementary in the favor of Tennessee, or is that complementary in favor of Bama? You know?
Right. That's why I'm giving Bama the edge in the sense of Tennessee has the better defensive line, but just how abysmal that Tennessee offense has looked. They're not going to be
Yeah.
on the field very long if they keep doing that, even if Bama's defense isn't up to snuff with what Tennessee does. So if you have like 4 or 5 3 and outs, or maybe a turnover that's in there for Tennessee, that's just so much time for Tennessee's defense to be on the field that it may not look apparent at the beginning of the game, but when you get into that late third, fourth quarter time, that's where it starts. It'll wear down even the best defensive units if they have to be out there all day.
Yeah, and they
So
can't get off the field. Bama's defense cannot get off the field if their life depended on it.
yeah. So if they find a way to
It's
do it against Tennessee, it's a
I
weird.
think I saw a
Yeah.
stat where Bama's offense is only averaging like 35 plays a game,
Yeah.
which is nothing. Like that's what most that's what most teams get in a half, let alone
Yeah,
an entire game, which is wild. And this is what's funny is like everyone keeps talking about Tennessee and they're talking about Nico Imaliava, but like I think Tennessee, where their bread and butter is that running back Dylan Sampson. Like he's the one who kept them in the Arkansas game. He's the like he is their only like rock. I mean, because
yeah,
again, Nico's not been playing well. And so I think however Dylan Sampson plays is where we're going to see Tennessee go.
100%.
But from the SEC to the Big Ten, we have, which no one had this game circled, but I have this circled now. You have number 16, Indiana, playing Nebraska, hosting Nebraska. You have Kurt Signetti from JMU. He's got his team 6-0 for the first time since 1967, looking to repeat that Rose Bowl season and then some. They've got a stud quarterback in Rourke, who was the 22 MAC player of the year and nearly has 300 yards a game, completing nearly 74% of his passes. I love Indiana. They are a great Cinderella team. What do you think about this game? Who do you got?
Yeah, I'm rolling Hoosier Daddy as well, and I think if anything,
Yes.
it's the coach's quote from the like post game presser, like his
Yes.
midweek presser.
Google me.
Yeah, I because I win. Google me.
Yeah. Yeah, Google me.
That
Like what? Like why? What do you tell recruits when you go in the office? Google me. Like if that's mic drop boss statement. Like I would play for Kirk Signetti. I mean he is no, but it's true. Like at JMU stud. This is how good he is. Hold on, let me see. He took 27 players from the transfer portal, right? 13 of
Yep.
them are from JMU. 14 of them are actually starting. So it's not like he just took 13 players from JMU. 14 of them are starting. Oh, not the 13 from JMU, but 14 of the 27 players he got from the transfer portal are starting. And here's the crazy thing. He took all those players from JMU and JMU is still competing
Yeah.
as a group of 5 team. Like that's how you know you've instilled a great system in a program. When your team is still winning, you've gutted the team and they're still winning, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like to me, I agree. Uh, I just think with Dylan Raiola being a freshman coming in off a rough game against Rutgers, but more importantly, this is his first real road test. Being in Bloomington, the last was Purdue, and he didn't even score until the third quarter. So I think it's going to come down to the usual. Again, it's the theme of the show, the trenches. And I mean, the Huskers are first in the Big Ten in terms of sacks and second in points. And actually, was another thing, they're third in run. But Indy's offense is leading the conference in scoring and passing. I mean, they are just insanely efficient. I think they're actually the most efficient team in the red zone in all of college football, or at least in all of the Big Ten.
Yeah.
So it's like this isn't like a basketball school. This is they will be saying who's your daddy to Nebraska. And I think they come away with the win. Sticking in the Big Ten, we have number 24, Michigan, playing the Fighting Illini, number 22. Michigan has 6 straight wins versus the Fighting Illini. The last loss was in 2019. Like the SEC matchups, I think the loser of this game will not only be eliminated from conference championship play, but also from the CFP. Both teams needing some help from the undefeateds to get in
Yeah. Well,
those
Michigan's already
conference.
got yeah, they've already got 2 losses overall,
Exactly.
and then yeah.
But I mean, you have what is his name? Jack Tuttle. Is that his name? Yeah, Jack Tuttle, their new quarterback, who a lot of people believe is going to help Michigan get this offense going, because this is an offense that has continuously struggled week in and week out, going from Orgy to I forgot what the other quarterback's name was, but they
Yeah.
couldn't figure that out, to where like again they're going to their third string, which is, you would think in any other situation, if you're going to a third string quarterback, your season's over. But a lot of people have Michigan in this, and some people actually have Michigan winning. What do you think, Rudy?
Is this in the big house or is
No,
this
this is in Champaign.
this is
This
in
is
Champaign? I mean,
yeah.
granted, it's not like a big atmosphere. To me, it's look, it's the same stuff that Michigan has struggled with. Yeah, quarterback play is one thing, but look, we're Miami fans. We know when you're digging into your depth chart at quarterback and think, oh, maybe there's a piece here.
All right.
You either see it in spring practice or you don't. I
That's
don't think
true.
there's not a miracle magic
Well,
bullet there.
here's the thing. I think. I think in the spring and fall, I think Jack was actually injured. He's coming off a shoulder injury. I don't know. I'm not too familiar with the extent of that shoulder injury and whether I know it barred him from fall practices.
Yeah.
So when they were preparing for this season in the fall, he wasn't even on the depth chart because of the injury. So I'm not sure if that also impacted his spring ball as well,
Yeah.
or maybe he was injured in the spring. So that's where the
So the
infrequency
wild
of
card comes in. I
yeah.
I
So
guess, do they have a package for him? Because the only thing I could think of is if you're gonna throw the exact same looks, because yeah, the quarterback play is one thing, but they rely so heavily on the running game. It's just something that's been it because remember, the head coach now is a disciple of Jim Harbaugh. They're
that's
playing
true.
the same style of football, same style of offense. So if they're getting stopped there, it's gonna be difficult for any quarterback to succeed. So unless they've got something totally different where they're scripting the first 10 to 15 plays and saying, this is your offense. It looks different than everything we've shown on film. I hate to say it, but I'm kind of gonna go Illini.
Yeah, I am too. And for this aspect, Illinois' passing attack versus Michigan's pass defense. This is what people really need to pay attention to because Michigan ranks 110th in passing and 16th in the Big Ten, which means they are bottom feeders. Meanwhile, Illinois' QB and wide receiver tandem are having a top 15 season in their respective positions. So both the wide receiver and their quarterback are ranked in the top 15. So that's where I think you're going to see. So you have a Michigan team who can't defend the pass, and you have an Illinois team who just loves to throw it. So I think that's going to be, if we see Illinois pulling this out, and I kind of think Illinois might win big, it's going to be because of that. And so you also have the fact, like we were just talking about, Jack Tuttle who's making his first start on the road. Michigan has 12 turnovers so far. Not really that great. And then history would say, though, Michigan should win this because they've
They're
led the
Michigan,
series
yeah,
and they're Michigan. But I just think that Michigan defense has been giving up way more than they need to. I think it's 250 yards a game through the air, every team, not just cupcake teams, but Big Ten teams too. And I just think Illinois is going to come with the upset. I think they're going to take it home.
yeah.
Yeah, we're going to see. But Rudy, you know what? I feel like you're very familiar. For those of you who are not familiar, our boy Rudy is a former Sebastian. And so you've had some experience being on the field. Have you seen this Penn State video?
Oh my God, yeah. We let's okay. So you want to like strap in and let's talk about this real quick because let me just go back to last week and say that I picked USC to win that game, and I didn't want to say it earlier because I knew we were gonna have a little moment here. If I knew that USC was selling a premium ticket package to have fans run onto the field with the team, I would have picked Penn State. I would have picked Penn State only because there's an overarching theme here. We touched on this earlier in our episodes of Pick Six podcast where we went after like Florida State because the geniuses up there, some genius up there decided to get rid of the war chant on third downs on defense. This is equally as indictable of an offense of putting a price tag on running your team out the field with random fans. In this case, yeah, Penn State fan, got to run out with his team because he was behind USC before Penn State ran out in the same tunnel. I'm not worried about other people's fans doing that as much as I'm worried about putting a price tag on your own traditions in college football. Because if you could put a
Yeah.
price tag on something that honestly, not even every player on your football team's roster has the ability to run out of the tunnel. There are walk-ons, there are practice squad players who will never be able to do that because they're not on scholarship and they're not dressing that day.
Yeah.
Uh, to put that on a random fan who pays a couple $100 on Game Time or whatever, third party ticket app that they use, that's insanity. And the fact that they're allowing that to happen cheapens the entire experience. I was joking with a few people when I saw that, including you. I said, if Miami had ever done this, I would riot because all you
You would
hear
have
about
drop
is how
kicked him as Sebastian. You would have
well,
been
just
like,
imagine like the special, like how special it is to like run through the smoke or to be a part
oh,
of
it's
you
my dream.
name the team. You name the team. It could be, running down the hill over there in Clemson when they get off the buses
Yep.
and they go down that way. Or if it's, petting that little gator statue and running out of the swamp. Or Nebraska has a really cool one when they play the same Alan Parsons project like the Chicago Bulls did back in the 90s. Nebraska's been doing that where they have the gates and they open up the gates and they run through, or Oklahoma with the buffalo. there's so many cool things that is so unique to the players because that's what you're selling your product
Program,
on.
yeah.
The minute that you allow someone to buy into that, it's no longer special.
I agree, and I think this is where I'm kind of torn. I think if you're gonna allow first, if you're gonna allow this, I think it can't be a person of the opposing team. I don't think you should be allowed to wear another team's color and then or represent another team and then run out of the tunnel, especially at a home game like that. It's if you're gonna run out of the tunnel, guess what? You're wearing the home team's stuff. Because I mean, I would also say like, you know, if UM, I mean, I'm not paying $1,800 for it, but if UM was selling tickets to run out in the smoke, I mean, I would be lying to you if I told you that wasn't like a dream of mine or a fantasy of mine to run. I mean,
Of
not
course.
all of us got to be Sebastian. Not all of us got to, you know, do
Yeah.
this CANES. Not everyone got to do that, you know, but, if you're going to have it, I think that should be number one. I don't think you should have it. And I don't like it for the pure fact that it cheapens the sport. You know, if this is for sale, what else is for sale? You
Yep.
know? And that's the slippery slope that we flirt with when we allow things like this, because it just everything becomes a commodity. And that's kind of one of the things that's a detriment to the sport is that everyone thinks everything is a commodity and not everything is meant to be a commodity in this. So I'm really glad you actually brought this up. I'm glad you got to have your rant and talk about it because I think it's one that people need to hear, need to see. But
There's
Rudy,
there's one other thing though about
go.
that.
Give it
Sorry,
to
I
me.
know I'm still hot about this for one reason, and it's because this was USC. This
That's true.
wasn't like Florida Atlantic where they put like "Come play in Paradise NIL" painted on the field, or that the
That's true.
sidelines say, we're 3 miles away from the beach and it's that way with arrows. This is one of the most storied programs in
Yeah.
college football. I think there's more Heisman Trophy winners at USC than anywhere else. And granted, they haven't been really at the top of the heap in a long time, not as long as Miami, but for a long time. And to have it happen there is scary because you could see that monetized everywhere else. But there is one more shout out. Hopefully we can, fit this in. I think we need to
Yeah, of
talk about this
course.
because it's newsworthy for today. Have to congratulate Joe Echeverria for
Yes.
being now the new president, officially the seventh president of the University of Miami from an athletics perspective. You're talking about a guy, I met him 6 years ago on the sideline. He had one of those U Health credentials on, like high fiving his kids, like watching the play, hugging everybody. The fact that now one of your biggest fans and one of your best fans in terms of like what
Former
their mindset
graduate,
is and watching, alumnus, the first
alumnus.
time
Yep.
that there's been a University of Miami alumnus as the head of
Yep.
the university, to have somebody so passionate about not only the academics, not only the health system that's here, the athletics programs, the student body. He's official. So this year is the 50th anniversary of his freshman year. It's the 20th anniversary of mine, 21st anniversary of you, or like 20th anniversary of you joining UM as a sophomore. So
Yeah.
to have that connection to the kids now is such a big deal. And the
I
fact that
agree.
even athletics went out and said, "You're one of our biggest fans, congratulations, welcome to that," just shows how special that is. So
Yeah,
I don't think we could have finished this without saying, it's about time that they took interim off of that title and made him the university president.
I agree, and I think it's always a benefit when you have someone who's been in house and they're an alumnus. You know, a lot of people have been talking about, oh, like if Mario wins this year, do you think he goes to the NFL? And I don't think he does. I think this is his dream job. I think this is again his dream is to bring his program back to prominence. I think Joe getting this position, it's like it's a dream for him. It's because he cares about this place. And I think when you have people who care about the logo, who care about the university, it only benefits the university in all aspects, not just athletics, but everything. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's a great shout out. I appreciate you doing that. Rudy, again, we have reached the end of another episode. I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you. By the way, I need to give a shout out if you've made it this long, but more importantly, the people who have been watching. We've got a ton of new subscribers. I'm not sure if you've noticed that, Rudy.
Yes.
And I just want to thank all of you who have been watching and subscribing to this. We will see you guys next week. Be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And of course, as always, go Canes.
Go Canes and happy Taylor Swifting tonight.